let us look at some general guidelines for creating a bar graph. So when you're creating a bar graph, the first thing you want to keep in mind is you need a consistent scale. So this means that we always begin with 0, and you need to look at your data and figure out which scale you're using, and you have to be consistent. So for example, if I was graphing a certain set of data and I realized that I can go by 2, I need to do that throughout the entire scale. So 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on. So I can't just kind of, skip through the numbers and just go from 0 to 4 and then to 8 and then to 16 and then to 20. So it has to be a consistent scale. Another thing we want to keep in mind is that all of our axes must always be labeled. So you must label the x-axis with the units and the y-axis with the units. And of course, your graph should always have a title. And this year we are using the following format: the independent variable versus the dependent variable. Or in other words, whatever you put on the x-axis versus whatever you put on the y-axis. Another thing we need to do is, if we are drawing our bar graph, you need to do a much better job than this one. So essentially it needs to be done, if you're hand drawing it, it has to be done with a ruler. And the bars must always have a consistent amount of space between each bar and the next, okay? So the amount of space that you are leaving between each bar and the next must be consistent. Bars can either be left uncolored, or you can color them in neatly. Or you can draw each bar or create each bar with a different color in order to distinguish between them. Let us look at a line graph now. So when drawing a line graph, we want to follow similar rules in terms of like including a title for the entire graph and also a title for the axes, right? So same idea, we have to label the x-axis, we have to label the y-axis, and we need a title for the entire graph in the format of independent variable versus dependent variable. And of course, we also have to have a consistent scale, okay? So if I'm going by ones, I will go by ones throughout the entire scale, and of course the space that you use between each unit and the next, or each number and the next, needs to be consistent as well. Now when we are graphing, yes, a line graph, of course what we do is we first look at the x-axis and the y-axis, and we kind of place a dot, okay, where our data is present. And by the end of our line graph, we will have something that looks like this. So what we must always do, if we're doing this by hand, we must draw a line of best fit. So the line of best fit ideally will go through the first point and the last point. And the reason why we have a line of best fit, you might have heard about this in math, is it basically gives us an idea about the trend, okay? So it shows the general trend that we see in our graph. So in this case, the trend is increasing, right? So basically, this is an increasing or a positive trend. If the line graph had looked something like this, you'll notice that it is not increasing, it is decreasing, right? This is a decreasing trend. So anyways, the line of best fit really does help us make sense of our data in a much more visual manner. All right, so these are basically the main tips that you want to keep in mind when graphing.